in, but not of. This was something that I struggled with as a little kid because I remember we didn't go to church up until probably 4th or 5th grade. And when we went, we weren't too happy about going. And when we got there, we were like, we are not going to relate to any of these kids. My brother was the, varsity quarterback. Well, he wasn't varsity quarterback at that time, but he was the star quarterback. He played football, baseball, basketball. He was the star. He was that guy. And it was tough because when we went to church, it wasn't filled with a bunch of that guy. It was filled with a bunch of people who we didn't relate to at all. And I remember having a conversation with my brother and saying, man, if this is what like going to church and, having a relationship with God is, I ain't trying to have any of that because obviously you got to turn in your cool card. You can't have anything that is fun. You can't, be cool. You can't. And these are the most important things when you're in 4th, 5th grade. I know as you go along, being cool probably isn't the smartest thing in the world. Generally, what it makes you cool makes you broke later on. But I struggled with this, and I kept hearing this, as I got a little bit older, you could be in the world, but not of it. And so I thought of this, and I struggled with it because I didn't know how to separate the two. And the cool thing is with Proverbs 17 today, the corresponding proverb for the corresponding day, what I found was it gave us a roadmap of exactly how to be in the world, but not of the world. And when we are in it, but not of it, the rewards are absolutely endless. I said to a woman the other day, I was on a podcast being interviewed, and I said, I listen to Wu-Tang and I love Jesus. And I believe you could do both of them at the same time. I listen to De La Soul, Tribe Called Quest. I listen to hip hop. I have fun with my kids. I have fun inside my environment. It's not just a, Aum kind of church environment. I believe you could have both. But if we're going to have both, you got to learn to be in the world, but not of the world. And that's what we're going to give you the roadmap today. So be sure that you stick with us until the end. So why don't we just get this party started?
Nothing more on my mind. I got 2 shines, so every day I grind. Work in the morning, work in the evening. We's achieving, cause we believing. It's for certain, we put the work in. We ain't stopped just because it's hurting. Right before your eyes, so it's coming to no surprise. The takeover is televised. Over and over and over again. Make no mistake, we continue to win. Defeat never known, cause I will not lose. They wanna mimic my moves, but can't walk in my shoes.
I think some of this stuff is going to be referred to as I move forward. I took the notes this morning, spent time with the Lord, and got into Proverbs 17, the corresponding proverb, corresponding day. It's 3,000-year-old wisdom. And as I sat, after I did my notes, and as I sat in it, God brought to me Christian Hosoi, the Christian Hosoi effect. See, Christian Hosoi is one of the greatest skaters of all time, if not the greatest. And I've been following his journey. And I read his book. If you haven't read his book, it is unbelievable. I mean, the story that he goes through and the trials, tribulations, and everything like that. And then he came to the Lord, and now he's helping people to understand that, giving your heart to a place that is right? And so I've been wanting to see him, and he was speaking this last weekend. So I actually, was it yesterday? No, it was on Saturday. And so I went up to Orange County. He was on a panel, and I sat and I listened to him. And he said, when I first, gained a relationship with God, I just went overzealous. I was like, this is all I want to do, and I can't do anything else. Then what God revealed to him was, no, Christian, I gave you the gifts that to help you be the greatest skateboarder in the entire world. I want you to continue to utilize those gifts and be in this world, but not of this world. And when that switch clicked, what he said was, as opposed to walking up to someone and saying, oh, well, I just want to preach the gospel to you, he was saying, I just want to be here. I want to love you. I want to make sure that you know that I care about you. And maybe a person's attracted because he's one of the greatest skaters, if not the, in the entire world. And that Christian Hosoi fame was not a bad thing. It's just when it's used and turned towards something that is not why he was supposed to use it, then it goes off the rails. But God has said to him, like, look, I'm going to utilize your talents, the things that you were able to utilize, and I'm going to utilize those, but I'm just going to shift the focus. And so he taught me about that, and I just thought of it as the Christian Hosoi effect, to be in this world, but not of this world. And I met him. It was so cool. I walked up, and I had messaged him on Instagram a bunch of times, so I want him on the podcast. And I sat in the front row, and I looked, and he just, he gave me that, yeah, hey man, how you doing? And then afterwards I said hello, and we talked, and I watched a guy interact with him, and the other guy came up and he told him his whole story, and I saw Christian stand there, and he was listening to him. He was amazing. But this guy was just talking, telling him his story. And then I noticed, and God just told me, just go and ask him a question. And I just asked him a question, and Christian began to talk to me. And as I sat, I just made eye contact with him. I smiled, and I stayed present with him. And he talked to me for about 15, 20 minutes. At the end, he said, hey, man, why don't you take my phone number? I love podcasts, and I'd love to be on yours. And so it was such a cool thing. And now Christian Hosoi is going to be on the podcast for every one of you guys to be able to enjoy. The greatest skater of all time is going to be on. And what I learned from him, though, is that we utilize our gifts. We don't have to walk away from them. So we could be in the world and not of the world. You don't have to choose one or the other. You can actually have both. You can have your cake and eat it too. And on Inchstones, which is little tiny things, if this is the first time you're tuning in, we do this thing called Inchstones, which is just small little things, little bite-sized pieces that you could take every single day and be able to pile those Inchstones together and create a milestone. We do this through Proverbs and the corresponding proverb, corresponding day. There's 31 Proverbs in the book of Proverbs, and there's 31 days in a month. And I found throughout the study of over the last 30 years, I've just found such amazing wisdom. And yes, I am reading Proverbs 1 at the first of every single month, but it reads different because my circumstances are different. First we read the word, then it reads us. And so let's jump right in. So to be in the world but not of the world, I heard this a lot, but I didn't know actually how to do it. And so here's a gauge to see if you're in the world and you're doing what the world would see as the best. And most of the time it's chasing shiny things, but it lists down these things. In verse 1 and 19, it talks about, do you have peace and quiet, or do you have strife? And this is a big thing that I've learned from my brother. My brother is very peaceful. He reads a lot, and he's not jumping up and down. He's not in your face all the time, but he is the absolute greatest at what he does. Cardenas Law Group there in Las Vegas, he didn't have to have any billboards. He didn't have to have any marketing. He created an incredible business and following because he stayed peaceful, he stayed quiet, and he stayed as far away from strife as possible. The next one is in verse 2 and 24. It talks about being thought out, thinking out, having thought of the future, and just to slow down. And think about this, like prudence is the thought of the future. In verse 2, in Proverbs 17, it says, a prudent servant will rule over a disgraceful son and will share in the inheritance as one of the family. It's amazing because sometimes it's the birthright of a person, but when we're prudent, when we just take thought of the future and we do that work slowly but surely, we don't chase the shiny things, right? We work our land and not chase the crazy fantasies. I fall into this all the time, to chasing the fantasies part and trying to hit home runs as opposed to making sure that we hit singles, doubles, sometimes triples, and sometimes we knock it out of the park. So I want to encourage you on is just to be thought out and to slow down. And that'll produce prudence and discernment. And that's in verse 2 and 24. In verse 3, 8, 20, and 23, it goes into this. And I would just want to read verse number 3. It says, the crucible for silver and the furnace for gold, but the Lord tests the heart. You see, you can't trick God. So your motives, if you have peace and quiet as opposed to strife, you're on your way of being in the world, but not of it. If you stay slow and you think things out, you have thought of the future, you have prudence in your life and discernment, again, you're on your way to being in the world, but not of the world. And then in this one with verse 3, 8, 20, and 23, you can't trick God. Like, he knows your heart. He knows exactly where you're at, and what he wants to do is he wants to first fill up your heart, and then he wants your lips to speak life into other people. And when we speak life, and when we encourage people, and when we give them, when we give them encouragement, and encouragement is free, and it has the greatest ROI of all time. And then in verse 4, it says, what and who are you listening to? And generally, you could tell if you watch somebody's fruit, if they say that you could tell a tree by its fruit, you could generally tell who someone's listening to and what they're listening to by the results in their life. If you're having results that you don't love, or that maybe they're not sustainable, then understand and know that when we take the time, in verse 4, it says, a wicked person listens to deceitful lips, a liar pays attention to a destructive tongue. What and who are you listening to? And whatever filter you run things through is going to be based on, like, a lot of times that's going to be our decision making. And so in verse 5, it talks about generosity. And in Proverbs, it always talks about this, about making sure that we don't take advantage of people, that we're doing right business, that we're doing right in relationships, and that we're constantly depositing more than we're withdrawing. And in verse 6, it talks about the example to your children and your family. And this one kind of hit me hard, because children's children are the crown of the aged, and parents are the pride of their children. And so with Father's Day just happening yesterday, it was amazing, because our pastor was talking about this, and he was saying, just be a person who is a voracious encourager. Be a person who's constantly encouraging people, making the environment better, leaving it better than the way that you found it. And this was something that my pops and my mom gave to me very early on, and something that I want to do. But then I started to ask myself, what example am I to my family? And where I failed yesterday, even with Father's Day, I failed because my daughter, we had such a great time yesterday. She's 15 years old. We're looking around at cars, whatever it is. We get home, I ask her to do the dishes, and she's like, oh man, and she starts complaining. Well, I just lose it. And when I lost it, I just pulled her in the room. I said, look, and I was just saying stuff that dads say, like, quit your yapping and all the stuff. And I realized that I reacted the exact way that I didn't like her reacting to me. And then I had to go, and we did a family meeting, and I tried to justify my stuff. And then I just finally had to go to my daughter and say, look, I apologize. I apologize for reacting in that way, because this sounds bad, but it was like revenge. Like, she did this, I'm going to show you. And any time that we're going towards revenge, then we're in the world, not of the world. We're going to have the tendency to listen to what's in the world. So, again, going back to being in the world, but not of the world. Think of this. Think of if you have peace and quiet as opposed to strife, you think things out, you have prudence and discernment, that you understand that God knows our heart, and then who and what are you listening to, and you have generosity. You're on your path to being in the world, but not of the world. And then the generosity, and then the example to your children. In verse 7 and 16, are you suited for the blessings you desire? And this was a big thing, because my brother asked me, I told him at one point a couple of years ago, I was sitting and I was saying, I was concerned financially. And he was like, are you ready for it though? He said, are you doing exactly what you love? Yes. Are you doing, if the money was different, would you be doing anything else? No. Then be patient. God's preparing you for the type of blessing that you're asking for. But if you're not prepared for it, you're not going to be able to sustain it anyway. And so that's in verse 7 and 16. So thanks, Rob, for smacking me upside the head. In verse 9 and 14, it says, does love overflow in your life? And I love this because Lenny Kravitz is one of my favorite in the world. And he has a song called Love Is My Religion. And you'll know that you're, if you want to be in the world but not of the world, if you're not of the world, love will overflow in you. But if you're in the world, and the world is the side that is telling you, oh, you got to have this, you got to have that, you got to have this for people to love you, you'll find that love is not going to be there. It's going to be that, where God tests your heart. He's going to say, like, why are you actually doing it? And so just ask yourself, does love overflow in your life? And that's in verse 9 and 14. In verse 10, do you seek counsel actively? This was a hard one for me to understand. because a lot of times I became a lone wolf, right? And I was the one-man wolf pack. I had my answers. I have a hard head, and I would just go at it. But do I actively seek counsel? This is a big one. And in verse 11, it says, do you spend time with him? Do you spend time with him, not through ritual, not through religion, but just time, just sitting, sometimes listening, sometimes talking, but do you spend time? And the more and more you spend time, the more and more wisdom he'll give, and that wisdom will give knowledge and a good understanding. It'll give insight and discretion and discipline and strength, and it'll move all the way through. In verse 12, it says, are you committed to your ways or to his ways? And this was a huge one. And I marked this one because it says, better to meet a bear robbed of her cubs than a fool bent on his folly. And so are you committed to your ways? And if you're committed to your ways, you're a scary person, because a lot of times when we, you can be so focused and want that thing to be done. And I've done this so many times where my wife reminds me of this. And thank you, Brooklyn. I love you. You're beautiful and you say nice things. And she just always tells me it'll come with ease and grace. Like if it's for you, it'll come with ease and grace. And that's actually in Proverbs 10:22, where it says, God will bring blessing without laborious toil. And in verse number 13 is, how is your forgiveness muscle? This was a hard one, because evil will never leave the house of one who pays back evil for good. And so how's your forgiveness muscle? Mine at times isn't that great. I was challenged with it last night with my daughter. And then in verse 15 and 26, are you doing the right thing? This is a simple one, and I talk about my friend Gary Spellman all the time, but simply, are you doing the right thing? And this is what Christian Hosoi helped me to realize, was when he's doing the right thing, when he's working his gifts, being the greatest skateboarder in the world, and he's out there and doing his thing, he doesn't have to become a preacher. He doesn't have to be, because he's just doing the right thing, and people will be attracted to that. And then he could say, you know what? It's not because of me. It's because of him over there, and give the credit up. In verse number 17, are you good, or how good are you to your friends? And this one I get challenged on too, because there's times where I'm not that great of a friend and I need to be better at it. And then verse 18, it talks about, are you in debt in any area of your life, personal, professional, spiritual, or financial? And in verse 18, it talks about this. And in other Proverbs, it talks about, if you're in debt, don't even sleep until you're done with it. Don't be indebted to anyone, because anyone or anything, because what'll happen is that thing will become your God, and God isn't okay with that. So that's a big one. And then in verse 21 and 25, are you bringing joy to your parents? This is a tough one, because some of us don't have the greatest relationship with our parents. Some of us do, some, back and forth. But are you truly bringing joy to your parents? And if it's not your earthly parents, are you bringing joy to the one who created you, and the parent who created you? And that was a question that we have to ponder, and we have to sit in. And in verse 25, it says, a foolish son brings grief to his father, and bitterness to the mother who bore him. Are you bringing joy and peace to your parents? And if not, God knows. And the crazy thing is, if you sit down, you already know these answers. And in verse number 22, are you providing and protecting hope? This was a thing that I talked to my brother about the other day, and we were talking about payroll, and I've been consulting with a lot of companies on payroll and compensation methods and things like that. And what I told him is, no matter what you do, number one, it has to be very quick. 2 snaps of a finger. You should be able to explain it to somebody as quickly as possible. If you're an owner, a CEO, whatever it is, you have to, with your employees and your workforce, they have to know the compensation just like this. If not, they're going to start to be weary. And if they're weary, then they start to lose hope. And if they lose hope, they put an expiration date on themselves. And so what I would say is, are you providing and are you protecting hope at all costs? And that's in verse number 22. As we finish up here, this was crazy, because in verse 27 and 28, it just brings it together. Wisdom, knowledge, understanding, and discernment. If we want to be in the world, but not of the world, we got to have wisdom, knowledge, understanding, and discernment. And here it goes. He tells us how to be able to do it in verse 27 and 28. If you're slow to speak, you'll get knowledge. If you're even-tempered, you'll get understanding. If you're silent, you'll be wise. If you hold your tongue, you'll be discerning. See, Jesus showed us, didn't tell us how to be in the world, but not of the world. And I struggled with this throughout my most of my life, because I wanted to, you want to be cool, you want to be accepted, you want to be loved, and also too, you want to, do the right thing. But sometimes doing the right thing is the coolest thing in the world, and it's not what people are going to praise you for, but it's the thing that long term. But these are the struggles. But what was so great is when I met Christian Hosoi this 2 days ago, he really showed me that you didn't have to choose either or. That if we chose God, he was going to amplify our gifts. He wasn't going to take them away. And so if you have a personality trait, you think, oh man, I need to get rid of this personality trait. I want to encourage you. And I want to encourage you right now to know that God's going to use those traits. My pops was probably the most hot or cold guy in the whole entire world. And when he got to know God and he started doing that, he went all in, just like he would go all in when he was doing drugs back in the day. And so God put those traits in us, but sometimes the world perverts it, and it gets our focus off. So I want to encourage you right exactly where you're at, that if you want to be in the world, but not of the world, we simply need wisdom, we need knowledge, we need understanding, we need discernment. And where does that wisdom come from to start it all off? It's from the fear of God, or just spending time with him. And he just wants to be able to hang out. Like, if you want to be in the world and not of the world, there's one quick way to be able to get there, and it's just to hang out with the one who built you in the first place. And so my challenge to every single one of you today is take 3 minutes today. Take 3 minutes, and I want you to write a letter. Write a letter to yourself, put your name on there, and write out where you came from, where you're at right now, and where you would like to go. And then give that to God and ask him if it's his will. My name is Kelly Cardenas. I have had a great time with you today. I encourage every one of you. You can be in the world, but you don't have to be of the world. You can listen to Wu-Tang. You can love God. You can listen to De La Soul, Tribe Called Quest, all the native tongue, and still love God. You can love the Oilers and the Titans, the greatest team in the world, still love God. You don't have to choose either or. He'll give you both. My name is Kelly Cardenas, and I'm officially off the hot seat. Peace, love, and soul.
Nothing more on my mind. I got to shine, so every day I grind. Work in the morning, work in the evening. We's achieving, cause we believing. It's for certain, we put the work in. We ain't stopped just because it's hurting. Right before your eyes, so it's coming to no surprise. The takeover is televised.